or broad pasture, as opposed to a narrow strait, symbolic of distress and danger. Okay, so you're talking about this word right here being the root for salvation. When you talk about somebody who needs to be saved, think about a person who's out in the ocean and they don't know how to swim and they're drowning and they're yelling out for help. So now what has to happen, they have to be removed from this dangerous situation into a situation that's more safe. So now they have been saved. They have been salvaged, because had they been left out there, they would have died. They would have been killed. But I'm going to save you, and I'm going to bring you to this open place, to this free space, to this safe place. Okay? That's the idea behind the word. The parent root, shin, ayin. Okay? So now you find the parent root at the end of this term. See, what this is the name of, matter of fact, let's go down, because we have some more names to look at. The next name, number 3091, which is the name Yahushua. Yahushua, which means Yah saves. So here's where we get that part from. Matter of fact, because you have the Wav here, it can be Yah he saves. Yah he saves. You have the Yod Hey right here. It says from 3050. Okay, which is the name Yah. And then it says and 3467, which of course is Yasha. But as I just mentioned, it's not so much Yasha, it's the parent root that Yasha is also based off of, which is the Shin and the Ayin. Okay, that's how this name is constructed. So you have Yod Hey, which is Yah, the addition of the Wa, He, Yah, He, and saves. Okay, so Yahushua. And there's another way that this name is written. You have a Shin, Wav, Ayin. That would be Yahushua. Yahushua, Yahushua. Okay. Which means, again, Yah, he saves. But under this definition, it says compare 1954. So, in 1954, that's our word Hushea. That name. But then it also has another term we can compare it to, number 3442. And that right here I put up there, and that is Yeshua. Now what they did with that, and I'm going to show y'all this as well, because for some, as it pertains to the name of the Messiah, in fact I won't erase it, I'll just leave it up there. They look at they pronounce it in this format. Yod Shin Wav Ayin, which is Yeshua. Yeshua, right? But in this variation, Yeshua means he who saves. Okay? But what's interesting about this, in Yeshua, it says for, as I have here, for 3091. In other words, at some point, this name, Yahushua, had been abbreviated to Yeshua. Okay? Matter of fact, and not in all the books, but when you go to Ezra, Nehemiah, and Ezra, Nehemiah, and I think it may be, that's another book I can't think of. But those books, when it mentions Yahushua ben Nun, it doesn't have Yod He Wav Shin Ayin. It had Yod Shin Wav Ayin. Because, and also, this is an Aramaic version of the name. That's why it says 43091. Okay? Because the association now. But then, here's another term that we want to look at. And it's the exact same thing, but you have the additional hey on it. Yeshua, which is Hebrew, right? You find that in number 3444. And what that means, and I have this one down here too, Yeshua, it means deliverance. And this is a derivative of, matter of fact, what it says specifically, it says feminine passive participle of 3, 4, 6, 7. Right? So, and this is not a name, this is just a term that's used, okay, which means deliverance. Whereas this here is a name, and of course we know this is a name, and we call this is a name, okay? Now, when we go to Numbers again, chapter 27, listen to what it says. And keeping in mind, while we're looking at it and going this direction, because Moshe said that Yahweh was going to raise up a prophet like him, right? Keeping in mind some of the things we just talked about in regard to Moshe. He was said to be toward Aharon like Elohim, mighty one on earth, all right? So, Numbers 27, starting in verse 18. Yahweh said to Moshe, take Joshua, the son of Nun, a man in whom is the Spirit, and lay your hand on him. So what's happening now? There's a transmission that's going on. So from Moshe, the authority is now being transmitted to Joshua. What is he teaching us? There's another one that's going to come. See, Joshua, matter of fact, here's what you can do. Joshua can be looked at, Joshua the son of Nun, can be looked at as a small-scale fulfillment of Yahushua, the word of Yah. Okay? Think about that. Think about Joshua's exploits, because Joshua was given a charge. Let's not forget that. Let's go back now. Okay, let's go back, because we looked at this in another one. Go back to Shemot, which is Exodus chapter 17. Right? Remember we talked about that? And let's see what he says again. In verse 16, Exodus chapter 17. He said, Yah has sworn. Right? I will willing we're getting to a further explanation of what's being said here. Yah has sworn, Yahweh will have war with Amalek. Remember when we looked at it and we found that Amalek is one of the descendants of Edom? Yah has sworn, Yahweh will have war with Amalek from generation to generation, right? So we have Yah making this declaration that Yahweh is going to war with Amalek from generation to generation. So let's go back up and listen to what was said. Let's go back up to start from verse 8. Then Amalek came and fought with Israel and Rephidim. Moshe said to Joshua, choose men for us. Listen to this. Because we're making a comparison now. We're making an association now that Joshua is the small-scale fulfillment of Yahushua. Okay? So Moshe, who is like Elohim on the earth, Moshe said to Joshua, choose men for us and go out, fight with Amalek. What you think he doing? What do you think let's make this comparison. What do you think he was doing when he chose the Talmudim? You know, the 12 disciples, if you will. What do you think he was doing? He's following after an order. You know, if you think about something that Moshe did, right? And we're just making some comparisons right now. Moshe had to choose out of 12. We just read it. But he chose out the 12, and they had to be a prince of that tribe. So you had the 12 heads of tribes of Israel. So he chose the 12. But then we also know that Moshe eventually did what? He went and chose another 70. Moshe did that. He did that. See, when Joshua came on the scene, guess what? That order was already in place. Now let's fast forward to the New Testament era, right? When Yahushua comes on the scene, the order is already established as well. But here's the problem. The order had been corrupted. So what did Yahushua do? This is what he did. He chose another 12 and another 70. Why did he do that? Because Moshe said that he was going to raise up, he being Yahweh, is going to raise up a prophet like unto him. So there's some things that he did that had to represent Moshe and being that likeness of Moshe, right? But not only is he showing how he's going to be the likeness of Moshe, he also showing us that he's going to follow after the example of Joshua too. Because he said, don't think that I came to bring peace. Joshua, when he was doing his campaign, he wasn't coming to bring peace. Joshua was the one who was leading Israel to take over the land of Canaan. Think about that. If Joshua the son of Nun was leading Israel in war to take over the land of Canaan, excuse me, follow me, people. Beshem Yahusha HaMashiach. Remember, he said there's going to be 7 nations that you got to go through. That's going to be greater and mightier. We looked at that. We touched on that briefly. Don't just focus on the 7 nations. Focus on the 7 heads on that beast. Focus on how the 7 heads of that beast, the scripture said, these are the 7 hills. Don't just focus on the 7 hills in the sense that Rome being a city on 7 hills. And we also looked at other cities that were considered to be cities on 7 hills. Focus on the fact that this world, the earth, has been divided into 7 continents. Think about it in that perspective. Allow ABBA, by his spirit, to broaden our horizon, if you will. He says, Moshe said to Joshua, choose men for us and go out fight with Amalek. Tomorrow I will stand on the top of the hill with Elohim's rod in my hand. So Joshua did as Moshe had told him and fought with Amalek. And Moshe, Aharon, and Hur went up to the top of the hill. It says, let's drop down to verse 13. It says, Joshua defeated Amalek and his people with the edge of the sword. So what we know from this, if Joshua was victorious in his battle, what that also teaches us is that Yahushua is also going to be victorious in his battle. Okay? He's going to be victorious. So let's go back. Numbers chapter 27, verse 18 again. Yahweh said to Moshe, take Joshua the son of Nun, a man in whom is the Spirit, and lay your hand on him. So now the transference of power is what's going on, right? Set him before Eleazar, the priest, and before all the congregation, and commission him in their sight. You shall give authority to him, that all the congregation of the sons of Israel may obey. Now, let's go to Devarim, with Deuteronomy chapter 34. And verse 9, listen to what it says. It says, Joshua, the son of Nun, was full of the spirit of wisdom. Now, let's make a brief comparison. Now, some of you may be familiar with this, some of you may not be, but if you want to research this, I don't have the verse right in front of me. Matter of fact, let me look it up real quick. Give me a moment. As ABBA leads us. Okay. Now, it says also that, and let's read this again. Deuteronomy 34, verse 9. It says that Joshua the son of Nun was full of the spirit of wisdom. So he had wisdom. Okay. Now, what this also, let's make this another side note. But this is also telling, because we knew what Joshua's responsibility was. His responsibility was to lead Israel in warfare. That's what his task was. Okay? So what this is also telling us is that in order to be a leader in warfare, you have to have wisdom. It said, for Moshe had laid his hands on him, the sons of Israel listened to him and did as Yahweh commanded Moshe. Okay? Now, listen to what Yahushua said. This is coming from Matthew or Matthew chapter 12, verse 42. It said, the queen of the south will rise up in the judgment with this generation and will condemn it, for she came from the ends of the earth to hear the wisdom of Solomon. And behold, someone greater than Solomon is here. So here you have a king known for his wisdom. Messiah said, a greater than Solomon. In other words, he that has an ear, let him hear. Because Joshua was filled with the spirit of wisdom, and he letting us know a greater than Solomon. In other words, I too am filled with this wisdom. Okay? Let's move on. And as we're going through, just to reiterate, we're looking at these different historical examples, but we're making these comparisons and we're allowing line to line. See what I'm saying? Rightly divided, making these connections. But it's not us doing it. It's Abba doing it, because he's the one who put this word together. Okay? Let's move on. In Devarim, once again, chapter 33, starting with verse 4. Listen to what it said. Because what we want to do, if Mashiach Yahushua is this prophet, right, that's supposed to be like Moshe, what else do we learn about Moshe? What else are we taught? Well, in Deuteronomy 33, 4 and 5, listen to what it says. It says, Moshe commanded us a Torah, an inheritance for the assembly of Yaakov. He was king in Yesharum. What this is acknowledging, even though at that time Israel didn't have a monarchy established, because he was in that position of leadership, it's as if Moshe was the king of Israel. And the word Yesharum is a poetic name for Israel. It means the upright ones. It says, he was king in Yesharum when the heads of the people were gathered, all the tribes of Israel together. So that means that if Moshe was a king, comparable to a king, Yahushua will also be comparable to a king. But we don't want to just say comparable to a king, because we already know he will be a king. Let's move on. In Tehillim, which is Psalms, chapter 99, let's go to verse 6. It says, Moshe and Aharon were among his priests. So in one example, we're being told that Moshe was a king. In this other passage right here, we're being told Moshe was a priest. Now, we already know that he was a prophet. So what we're being taught, that Moshe, he was a prophet, he was a priest, and he was a king. He fulfilled all three of these roles when you talk about being anointed. This is also teaching us that Yahushua will also fulfill each of those roles. Each one. Because when you think about the idea or the topic of the Messiah, right? Whenever it comes up in regard to Yahushua being the Messiah, there's always a question of whether or not he was a king, and he didn't do anything indicating that he was a king. Because people only looking at the Messiah in the aspect of being a king. That's not the only thing that a Messiah is going to do. That's one aspect of it. But the first aspect is to be a prophet. The second aspect is to be a priest. And the final aspect is to be the king. See? And when you look at the life of Yahushua HaMashiach, the first part was the prophetic aspect, which is why this is truly the prophet. Why did they think that? Because there's another passage in the New Testament. It said he didn't speak as the scribes and the Pharisees spoke. He spoke like somebody who has authority. So when we look at it, what is a prophet? A prophet simply is a spokesperson of Elohim. So when he spoke, they didn't just hear a man speaking. This is what they're basically saying indirectly. We don't just hear a man speaking. We hear the words of the Most High coming from this man. This is truly the prophet. That's the idea. He says, again, Moshe and Aaron were among his priests. Shemuel among those who called on his name. They called on Yahweh and he asked them. So again, Moshe was a priest. He fulfilled multiple roles. Okay. Now let's go to one passage in particular. And we're going to reiterate and look at this another time. Tehillim, still. 110 verse 4. Now, in Psalms 110, from my understanding, among Hebrews, Israelites, and Jews alike, they all understand this to be a prophecy about the Messiah. They all understand it, right? But listen to it, and even when you look at it from this perspective, Yahweh has sworn and will not change his mind. You are a priest forever in the order of Melchizedek. Now what this does, because one of the things that we started talking about early on was the priesthood. And why it is necessary for a priesthood to exist today. Excuse me. But what people argue, well, we're not under the Levitical priesthood anymore. Well, if you go back, remember, the Levitical priesthood was also created after a pattern. When people think about Moshe being up in that mountain and Mosai telling him, saying, make sure you make everything according to the pattern, they only focus on the tabernacle and the furnishings inside. They don't think about the fact that the priest's garments was also part of that pattern. And if the priest's garments were a part of that pattern, that also teaches us indirectly that the priesthood itself was part of that pattern. So if it's patterned after something else, and we learn about a priest long before Levi come on the scene, Abraham, as we learned in Hebrews, paid tithes to Melchizedek. And by way of Abraham paying tithes, guess what? Levi was in the loins of Abraham, and they paid a tenth to Melchizedek, who was a priest of El Elyon, the Most High Mighty One. So apparently Melchizedek represents the pattern that the priesthood was based on, because he was a priest of the Most High Mighty One. The Levitical priesthood was established to teach us something when we get into those different names and those terms.